So the United Kingdom has a new Prime Minister. 10 Downing Street will now be the home of the Labour leader Keir Starmer after the party swept the election mandate. This brings to an end the 14-year-long turbulent run of the Tories.
Good afternoon. I have just returned from Buckingham Palace, where I accepted an invitation from His Majesty the King to form the next government of this great nation. I want to thank the outgoing Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. His achievement as the first British Asian Prime Minister of our country, the extra effort that will have required, should not be underestimated by anyone. And we pay tribute to that today.
So let's compare the parliaments under Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. This time round, the Labour has made the highest gains. It has more than doubled its tally since 2019, and the Tories were widely projected to be reduced to a two-digit figure. However, they've managed to avoid that embarrassment and have gotten about 121 seats this time round. They're still drastically low from the 2019's 345 seat majority. These numbers are still not the final result. There'll be a recount in the Highlands tomorrow morning. Now, much to the dismay of Rishi Sunak, it is expected to be the party's worst performance in almost 200 years. The defeat has put the future direction of the party likely into uncertainty. Rishi Sunak has defied speculations that he would lose his home seat of Richmond and not Allerton. But he's apologised for the overall loss and has also stepped down from the leadership of the Conservative Party.
I would like to say, first and foremost, I am sorry. I have given this job my all, but you have sent a clear signal that the government of the United Kingdom must change, and yours is the only judgment that matters. I have heard your anger, your disappointment, and I take responsibility for this loss. This is a difficult day, at the end of a number of difficult days. But I leave this job honoured to have been your Prime Minister.
The Liberal Democrats have also made record-breaking gains as they smashed through the Conservative heartlands, taking the seats of two former Prime Ministers, David Cameron and Theresa May. These symbolic victories demonstrate the depths of dissatisfaction amongst the long-standing Conservative voters. Now, speaking of the big names falling, perhaps the most notable was the defeat of the former Prime Minister Liz Truss. About 2 years back, the former Prime Minister had served for just 49 days at number 10 Downing Street before being ousted by her party. She lost to Labour in the constituency of South West Norfolk by just 630 votes. And our correspondent Oliver Reagan has been tracking the story very closely and has sent us this report from Westminster in London. Listen in.
The Labour Party under Sir Keir Starmer reinvented over the past 5 years since he took charge and are celebrating a fantastic victory, a huge mandate from the British people, albeit with not a huge voter turnout and also not a huge percentage of the vote, but a tactical, very organised campaign has seen them pick up a ream of seats they've never won before and utterly now dominate the House of Commons that we can see behind me. We've just had Sir Keir Starmer naming his cabinet in the past hour. All the big names have been walking up that famous street into number 10 Downing Street. He's named Angela Rayner as his deputy, the likes of David Lammy as his foreign secretary and Yvette Cooper as the home secretary. It seems he's remaining very loyal to those who have been in his shadow cabinet when he's now naming his first government cabinet.
All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of how things, of course, have changed in British politics, we're being joined by Mr. Mike Buckley, who's a senior journalist and a political commentator and is joining us from Sheffield at this moment. Mr. Buckley, this is a big win for the Labour Party. Keir Starmer said that change begins now. But the fact is, considering the depths of challenges that Keir Starmer actually faces in front of him, can he bring about meaningful change, especially with respect to the British economy?
Yes, he can. And Keir Starmer and his Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, the first female Chancellor of the Exchequer in the UK, our Finance Minister, they both have a very clear plan of action to bring change to the UK economy. They will make changes very swiftly, I think, to our planning system, which will allow us to build more infrastructure quickly that the country needs and build more houses. We don't have enough houses in the UK, which inhibits economic growth because people can't move to bigger properties or can't move for new jobs, for example. And also just the process of house building itself, is a stimulant to the economy. But we also need investment in things like transport, in our energy infrastructure, of course, as well as we move towards net zero and reducing our carbon impact on the planet. We also need to shift to lower carbon forms of transportation as well, getting people away from petrol and diesel vehicles and into electric vehicles and onto trains and other public transport. So that will happen fairly swiftly.
Right.
And I know that Keir and Rachel also have plans to encourage business investment to come into the UK. And there's already encouraging moves on that front already. So just because Labour has now won the election, and I think the business world and the investment world is thinking that things are now moving in a more stable direction politically and economically in the UK.
Right.
The value of the pound, our currency, has risen, and investment markets are looking more favourably on the UK as a destination for their money. So that again is going to improve outcomes for the UK.
All right, interesting. You seem to be sounding very optimistic in terms of the changes that Keir Starmer can bring about. But the fact is, over the last couple of years, we've witnessed these very desperate situations where people had to make a choice between heating or heating during winter. The waiting time to get access to the services of the NHS have been just way too long for a lot of people in Britain. Can those aspects be changed by Keir Starmer in the foreseeable future?
Well, there are some obviously longer-term challenges. I mean, the economy itself is a long-term challenge, but there are particular challenges in public services that will take a long time. We have the highest ever waiting lists in the NHS, so people waiting for treatment, and even people turning up at emergency departments now have quite long waits often because we just don't have the staff in place. We have old buildings and infrastructure. So we need capital investment into the buildings, but we also need investment into our staff. We need to fill some labour shortages in the NHS and in our social care system for elderly or disabled people as well.
Right.
So all of this is going to take time. And the Labour leadership have been very honest that they will make a priority on bringing waiting lists down, but that it will take time. And similarly, again, through the previous government's mismanagement, our prisons are full. They're full of prisoners. So we're now having to release prisons early before the end of their term to create space for new prisoners to go into prison. In the short term, there's no solution to that. In the medium term, we do need to build more prisons. But of course, in the long term, we need to make sure that we rehabilitate prisoners so that they don't reoffend and go back into prisons, and slowly but surely bring down the prison population.
All right, and also the new Parliament's composition witnesses the entry of people such as Nigel Farage. How do you think that will play out for British politics in general?
This is a real concern for all of us in the centre of British politics, whether on the centre left or the centre right. So, the moderate centre, the normal politics of our country, and indeed most countries. So we haven't really had far right members of Parliament in the UK before. We have a system called first past the post, and that tends to exclude the extremes on the left or the right. So it's a shock that yesterday Reform, which is a far-right party run by Nigel Farage, won 4 parliamentary seats out of 650, which might sound like a small number, but given the electoral system that we have, that's a real concern. And it's a real concern that so many people voted for Reform as a party and voted for Nigel Farage because his views and their views are quite extreme and quite toxic. For example, views on immigration, they're quite pro-Putin and Russia, whereas, of course, most people in the UK are very much on the side of Ukraine. In that conflict, they favour a privatised health system in the UK instead of the public system that we have now.
Right.
They don't have normal views, and certainly their views towards ethnic minorities and immigrants are, quite frankly, shocking and objectionable in all ways.
All right.
So mainstream parties, particularly the Labour Party, but also the more sensible people in the Conservative Party, need to fight back against Nigel Farage and beat his arguments to make sure that next time around those 4 people lose their seats.
I think that's something that'll be watched very closely. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Mike Buckley, for joining us and getting us that perspective there. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.